Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Hello, everyone, and good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. It's another recording. We keep going no matter where we are or how much we're traveling. We're always going to be here.
Well, Tommy, I think we have a bit of a reputation to uphold, I guess is what I would say. We've been doing this since 2021, 4 years now, and we're almost about ready to hit 5 years when we hit 2026. Is that right?
I think so. We've been doing this for a long time.
When was the first episode? Do we know when the first episode was?
May of
2021.
Yeah.
May of 2021. Wow, that's a long time ago. Anyways, so we can't miss a week. We got to have at least some episode, 2 episodes a week since 2021. That's impressive. I'm excited to see how this is going to go. Who knows, Tommy? Maybe it'll be 2031 and we'll still be doing episodes.
I
had enough of us by then.
Dude, I hope we're still doing this, but it's been fun, man. So
if nothing else will be retired and old people talking about, I remember when data was like, you had to talk to the computer with a keyboard, like all kinds of crazy things.
Dude, it's crazy. So
awesome. Random note here. Let's talk about our main topic. And I'm going to come give you a little quick, just a beat from the street here. I have something that kind of came to mind, Tommy, as we were talking about the future of things as well. So our topic today is untangling workspaces, branching, and artifact chaos, all the artifacts you build inside Fabric. So just getting your whole Fabric experience organized. Let's talk about that. This is a mailbag today. That will be our main topic.
All right, dude, I'm excited to get into. We've been getting a ton of mailbags lately too. I don't know if you've noticed that, but it's been great.
Well, the call outs have been good here because they all know we're going to be leaving for holidays. They're like, well, maybe I can get my question in for the holidays. And maybe that's what people are thinking. So definitely go to Power BI Tips/podcast. If you have a question, if you want to put one there, we will definitely address it. It comes into our backlog and we'll kind of pick out the best topics from there as well. So anything's fair game for Power BI and Fabric. Feel free to ask your questions. Real quick, Tommy, I want to give you a very brief beat from the street here. I remember you and I talking like a long time ago on the podcast. I wanted to just say it out loud, just to say we talked about it on the podcast. I had originally noted that the world of AI and how we build apps is going to be able to let you build any kind of personalized app in a rapid succession, right? You can go get an example of an idea. You can build something that's a personal app, a personalized app that does something I need it to do with relatively ease. Today, I saw the first article of someone else talking about the same concept and saying apps are now being able to be developed at a fast enough pace and clip that not software developers can go describe the kind of app that they need, and most of the main components of that application are being able to be built by AI. So, Tommy, you had this idea like, hey, I want to build a note-taking app, or I want to build a grocery list thing, but I don't want to pay for the said app to go do it, right? So if the app that you're trying to purchase can't do this very elaborate barrier to entry item, like, use maybe AI or do something fancy, you can literally vibe code the app in like an hour or two. So now it becomes a trade-off of, do I want to pay $5 for this grocery app that I maybe would use for the next year or two? Or do I want to spend an hour of my time right now to build exactly what I need and then iterate on that design and build it to be what I want? Like I think we're stepping into a new era, Tommy. Like this is a brand new world where you don't need to go buy apps anymore. You can build many tools and apps as you need them. What are your thoughts? What are your reactions to this?
Honestly, though, I haven't thought about it from the iOS side, or from the mobile side. But what I've actually been doing is creating apps that is just like kind of hosted on my local network that just kind of run based on various needs I have. Like I have.
Give me an example. Give me a clean example of this one.
I'll give you a very basic general example. So always dealing with local AI models, and I want to be able to kind of organize, manage, categorize them, because like if you download from Hugging Face, it's all convoluted in terms of the files and the types, and the names are not very descriptive. Like, is that for, this type of generation, or is this instructing? So what it does is it actually
you need like a library of like,
right.
Hey, is this image generation or is this natural language or like, is this
exactly and then like how much I like it, where it's located. So basically,
Oh, interesting.
it creates like a SQLite database around the folder, and then I can organize it, categorize it, and then basically say, hey, this is like for captioning, this is for computer, coding kind of thing. So
So the back end is SQLite on your computer. The front end is what? What did you build the front end in?
Oh, whatever it built in. I think it was like just JavaScript, a basic app kind of thing. And then all I do is, and like it creates a batch script. So all I have to do is like add a shortcut to my program and say start the server, and then I can access it anywhere on my local network. It's great.
So it's running. So you've actually built a server, and it acts like a web page. So basically, it's like a server URL.
Exactly.
You like localhost, whatever port, whatever.
Like a web app, exactly.
And then you can just go there and just run it anywhere on your local home network.
Exactly. So
this is my point, Tommy. I think this is going to become the commodity. Like, when do I get to have a window into my iOS, iPhone, Android app and just say, instead of going there to get a bunch of games or things on your phone, why don't you describe the game that you want? Hey, I want a game that does this. Hey, I want a game that I saw this game that does this kind of thing. Describe into the AI what to do. You could build all these little mini either games or apps or tools or solutions. And I just want to say, I saw it coming. I'm starting to see this become a reality. Like, there's all these different app dev companies that are like now touting, build your entire app on top of this program, on this platform. Lovable, I think, is one of the companies or the websites that are doing this. Claude Code is doing some of this stuff for you as well. Like, they're very advanced in being able to build massive apps and help code bases. So I think AI right now is really good at writing code and building apps because it is such a structured way of doing things. When I look at an app, Tommy, I think about a couple things. Authentication, like how do you sign into it? Storage of information, and then kind of the UI that sits on top of it. Like if you can kind of get AI to build those three things for you, and you can get like a pattern of prompting that lets you build those things and kind of build anything you want there. Anyways,
yeah. Well, have you done anything like that?
I'm starting to. I've been building lots of little apps that I've been throwing away because I have a specific purpose. I'm trying to educate myself in a way that can let me build what I really want to build, which is more elaborate Fabric workloads using AI. I recently just did a video, I think in the last month or so, with Gerd. Got a good number of hits on YouTube. But Gerd from the Microsoft product team built Workloads V2. And inside that Workloads V2, he's using Claude Code to generate a lot of the code to build the workload. So to get it set up, to have instructions, to have a README file. So he's got a project that you can almost chat with to help you build the app that you need to build, which is pretty amazing. So
interesting.
I'm trying to unpack, like, okay, what did he do? How can I further leverage this? How can I build my own apps? And I'm now picking up small projects, to your point, Tommy, around the house, around everything I see now in my family is like, there could be an app for that. There could be an app, like, who left the dishes in the sink? I could make an app for that. Hey, I want to go sell sourdough online. That could be an app for that. I could build an app for this. Like I could see this idea of there's a lot of manual tasks that I'm coordinating that I'm thinking now in terms of, if it only takes me a little bit of time to build the app, why not build it? And so that's kind of where my mind is going right now. More recently, my development has been focused on, I have so many media analytics platforms, Tommy. We're all over the place. We're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, we're on X, we have like Rumble, like all these different platforms that we broadcast to. I'm trying to get my head around what's our usage and metrics, and what things are good content or not good content. And shocker, each of these platforms lock you in with their analytics, and they don't really give you anything. You don't really get much information out of their analytics. So very difficult to get a good read on what impact your social media stuff is having an impact with, unless you're paying for advertising to these platforms. So that being said, I'm doing a lot more development around, okay, what can I use AI to help me do to go scrape the web, get content, log into portals, and then get data out of there that I need to go analyze later on and put it to Fabric. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. One thing I've observed in general with app development, Tommy, everyone uses Docker. Docker is like a thing. And while I like Docker, I'm like, I'm torn because I want Fabric to be my backend. Because I have a SQL database. Like seriously, anytime I build an application now, I'm thinking I don't really want to go buy an Azure-based backend data system thing. I want to use what's already in Fabric as my backend. Cosmos DB, KQL databases, or SQL databases, right? These three databases are operational systems. They're used to build apps on top of them. And the reason I want to use them is because once I use them as my app backend, any data that's being used or generated there easily is added to my lakehouse. It's easy for me to do analytics on top of it. And at the end of the day, it's no use. I mean, you can have tools that help you build a process, but at the end of the day, you need all that information to be sourced and exist inside some reporting solution. So I'm designing like the report facing thing backwards into like my applications. Where do I put this data so it's easy to get access to? And yeah, there's some things here. You can do mirroring to a Postgres database. You can mirror it to a Cosmos DB, but I really just want the data to be stored inside Fabric. It makes my opinion, it makes my life easier. What are your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. And I think that's one of the things I've been trying to do is, some of the data that I actually want is from Fabric. I'm like, okay, do I have to open a Power BI file and do the old school, like just an export? What do I got to do here?
Yes, exactly.
And like even at one point, I'm like, should I even embed in this web app?
Yes.
Like one of my Power BI reports. So there's a ton of good options there. So
even if I go to like some platforms, like let's go to Twitter, look at your analytics from Twitter. There's a download button. You can go into Twitter, you can set a time range, and you can download a bunch of data. Great. Like, I want to automate that. Where's the API to automate this stuff? Like that, to me, this is so clunky because I can't get the information out that I need and it doesn't put it where I want. I'm really close. Like the automation is so close to being there, but we're not quite there yet. Like it's not exactly there. One last thought here, Tommy, before we move on. Have you heard of the browser called Comet?
Oh, I did try it out. Yeah.
That's Perplexity's version of a web browser that has AI enabled on the browser. I've been substantially impressed by the Comet browser, an AI-based browser. It's basically, I think, built on Chromium. It's a Chrome-based browser, but the AI can take over your window and start doing a bunch of things in the window that can like open a page, search for things. And I was just having it do some research basically on some companies that I had on LinkedIn. And I just basically gave Perplexity, the Comet browser, said, go find this company on LinkedIn, research what they do, tell me what kind of products they make, and give me like a summary of how I could best sell a data platform to them, right? Just some general terms. And it was able to go to the website, find navigation. It was taking screenshots of things. It was reading the screenshots back. It would say, oh, I found the search window. And then it was typing things in. Oh, look, it looks like it found the company. And it was clicking on stuff. This is next level stuff, Tommy. And while it was doing the research and going through the browser and doing things, I could shift my attention to something else, which was impressive to me. So this is where I was fully taking, and this is the first aha moment I had around taking a task that I needed to do, describing the task to an AI agent and letting it just run and do its research. And then I could focus my attention on something else. This, I think, is what AI is going to be doing.
I completely agree. And I mean, so I did try Comet. I was a little frustrated because maybe there's some setting or some extension that was affecting it. Because it would be like, I would ask it a question. It's like, hey, we're doing all those changes now. And you're like, no, you're not. You're not doing anything right now. And what is it called? A hallucination. So
yes.
My thing was definitely hallucinating. So
your comment was hallucinating. Sounds like, again, Tommy, these words we use, like the things we say out of our mouths. Like if I went to any person who wasn't a data person and said, I've got this thing called Fabric and I'm using Comet and it's hallucinating, you would think I'm crazy. The terms, like, these words don't even make, I don't have any context what these words mean together. It's like a word salad of things. Anyways. That being said, let's get into our main topic today. I think this is kind of interesting because this idea of lots of things in workspaces, branching in CI/CD strategy, I think this plays very well into our question for today. So with that, let's hard transition over to our question. Tommy, to you.
Let's get into it. All righty. So I'm the director of data products and analytics, and I've been listening to the podcast for a few years. My department is responsible for building, maintaining an enterprise data lake, Power BI reporting, and a self-service community at a 10,000 person company. We are all in Fabric, but can't get a straight story from Microsoft and our various consultants on what are the best patterns for organizing Workspace and Artifact. Love this already. For example, managing dev, test, prod, self-service, bronze, silver, gold, pipeline, lakehouse, notebook, semantic model, report app, and business domains. Further complicating that, the CI/CD features still seem partially complete. So how does one manage feature branches and pull requests into dev from a developer without proliferating workspaces? Also love that. Also, why are we trying to standardize around the direct lake pattern? But that has, we are trying to standardize around the direct lake pattern, but that has implications on co-locating lakehouses and semantic models. Woof.
A lot of details here. So there's a couple statements in here I'd like to correct a couple things just from an understanding standpoint. I think this is a really good question. Solid, right? This is what I would say the Fabric adoption roadmap. For those of you who are not aware of that, Microsoft has done a really good document around the Fabric adoption roadmap, which used to be the Power BI adoption roadmap. But they've kind of changed some of the language here. And one of the things that I think that makes Power BI and Fabric really exciting for us to use is it's not you don't have to conform your business to what Fabric does, right? It's not a one size fits all type story. You can design the system how you need to and use the system that works best for your business structure. When you read the adoption roadmap for Fabric, there's a lot of effort on diagnosing how your company does work. Who are the people? What are their skills? What is your threshold and tolerance for data and data security? Those are some fundamental questions I think you need to ask up front and decide what those look like first. Once you decide on those initial experiences, then you can kind of back your way into, okay, how does security, CI/CD, deployment, central BI, and community all fit together? Because it all does fit together. There's patterns here that Microsoft is describing. I mean, again, Microsoft has been working with the world's largest companies. They all use Fabric. I think Tommy, or they all use Power BI for at least Power BI. I think last time I heard was 98 of the top 100 Fortune 100 companies are all using Power BI at some level. So Power BI is pervasive. It's everywhere. And we're starting to hear more and more adoption. I think one of the recent notes at the FabricCon Vienna note was the Fabric platform is Microsoft's fastest data platform growth ever. All their data platforms, no matter what the Synapse, Azure data products, the Fabric experience is the fastest growing one because they're making it easy for stuff to work together. So let me just pause there. Your initial reactions to the question.
I mean, this is literally in all the frustrations I think we are still having with Fabric. And I know you mentioned the Fabric roadmap, but it's good. But is it complete or anywhere near complete? Not at all, especially with the needs that we have and the kind of conversations in a wider audience. I mean, just dealing with the Workspace and Artifact organization. Is there a simple, straightforward way? I mean, you really have to break that up. Right now, all the things on the roadmap, the categories and the scenarios are general. And that works, but only if you're using a certain workflow or a few of the workflows, which are usually not the case. I mean, at least with Power BI, the workflow, there weren't too many diversions in terms of how you develop a semantic model, right? Sure. Where, usually I'm going to import, or I may do something with analysis services where the data is coming from, but that is the same funnel, right? Obviously different approaches. And there's still a comprehensive roadmap for Power BI on the best way. I remember the PDFs, like the 220 PDFs when Power BI first came out on building that up. And it was very intense. And that was just semantic models. Now we're introducing all the other features with and again to one place. And I think this is going to take time until let me rephrase that. It's going to take time and feature updates for this to become something that we have a good grasp on.
I'm gonna jump into a couple comments you made there, Tommy, around the Fabric platform. We're 2 years into this.
I get it.
Right? I remember when Power BI came out. When it first came out, it was good, but I had really no reference point to compare it to. Right? I didn't have any expectations kind of initially coming out. It was just like this brand new thing, didn't really know what was going on. And Microsoft was very adamantly listening to feedback in that early stages of like to build what we need. Year one of Fabric has been a lot of Microsoft listening and refining and getting things working. I think there's a lot of issues with getting things working. Recently, though, this last year, I feel like there's been a lot of technical debt that was required to get out of the way in early year two, so that now we can get to a place where we're starting to see like real feature production that is helping me build stuff that's cool. Like it's helping me go faster. And what I mean by that is like, let's talk about Data Flows Gen 2. I mean, we gave Data Flows Gen 2 a really hard time. Too expensive, too slow, can't handle big volumes of data. This year, we saw a huge improvement with like parallel processing in data flows. We now have accelerators on it. We're using a new .NET backend for data flows. Like Microsoft took a really big, like that's a monumental investment to rebuild the engine of data flows Gen 2 to make them more performant, faster, and more cost effective. There's even a whole new pricing model. If the data flow runs for the first 15 minutes, it's a certain rate. And then at 15 minutes, the rate cuts in half. Like it's a substantial decrease in charge billable rates on CUs after the first 15 minutes. There's a whole bunch of stuff here that I'm like, they've done a major rebuild. And so when I look at this, there's a lot of technical debt that had to get eaten up and out of the way for us to really start seeing improvements. Now, what I feel like is we're doing a lot more. Again, we're back in the mode of listening to the customer. What do they need? What are we trying to build? But I see the whole Fabric platform becoming much more mature at a much faster clip. If you ask me, when we talked about Fabric, Tommy, when it was initially going GA, we were like, it's okay. There's a lot of friction. Wait, give it a year. And then now I feel way more confident leading with Fabric as your only data solution. Like this is the data solution we're going to use, and you can be effective with it. Let me pause there. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree to an extent. So I'm actually curious for you. Give me some examples of those things that have changed or updated where that's been that catalyst for you feeling like your workflow, that process has actually come to being more productionalized. Because I'm curious on what you're seeing as those big those advancements in the tool.
Sure. A couple of things that I think that are very useful here are, one is an improvements on data flows. That's been a big improvement for me. I like using them. The UI is useful. When I think about all of the users that I work with that come from Power BI and are moving into Fabric, their first inclination is, let's build a data flow Gen 2. That thing has to be cheaper and more efficient than the data flow Gen 1. The other big thing improvement here has been just ease of using the lakehouse. That's been a major improvement for me as well. So ease of getting data in, ease of getting it out. This is a very nuanced feature, Tommy. I know no one else likes this except me. This is just me thing. You can now download files directly from the lakehouse. You can go to the lakehouse in the web and download a file from there. That should have been a feature that existed a long time ago. So I can create files that are produced from notebooks and now I can download them. Yay. This is what I wanted. Like I want to be the one lake is a file storage system. I need to be able to get stuff up and down. Should be easy, right? So you could use the OneDrive, OneLake connector for your desktop and synchronize files as well. That's another way you could have gotten files up and down from the OneLake, but now you can do it directly in the browser as well. So it's like improvements like that. The CI/CD patterns was very rough, Tommy. Getting anything to deploy from dev to test to prod in those early days, it was painful. And I had a lot of issues with connecting to Git and or Azure DevOps, where things would deploy, but not deploy, not synchronize correctly. There was a lot of bugs, I think, around that system. To me now, most of those are worked out. I don't have any issues connecting to things. The other big improvement, this is more a Power BI side that I will directly point to, is the PBIR format. PBIR has been a game changer for me. Like I build products on top of PBIR. This is amazing. So the level of automation and level of effort we can build out at the PBIR level is absolutely incredible. So I really like the PBIR format. That's another big win, and helping you create teams of people to build products together. And so I think these are some of the questions that this speaker is asking about. The question here is, what are the patterns for my organization? Is one of the tone I hear in this question. Another question I hear is, CI/CD doesn't seem very robust yet. So what does that look like, right? And then I also hear standardizing on direct lake patterns. And then they're talking about co-locating lake houses and semantic models, which I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that mentality. A semantic model using direct lake must be in Fabric, but you don't have to co-locate them in the same workspace. That's not necessarily true. So I think maybe there's a little bit of, missing on information on some of the direct lake items. How I would view direct lake is pre-processing the data before it gets to Power BI. Mm-hmm. So there's also been a lot of improvements around Spark as well. So those are kind of my examples, Tommy. Did I
know, I think that's good. And I think the PBIR, you're dead on. You're dead on in terms of the advancement that's made, the feature set and what is available. Yeah, that totally. For me, though, that doesn't help answer the whole story, at least with the question here, because that's only, we're still dealing just with Power BI, right? In that situation, we're not dealing with the other types of artifacts here. So there's still a ton there that remains to be seen in terms of the best practice. So I know we're getting a lot better with the lake houses, but I think when you are dealing with multiple people with multiple roles, let's just deal with the, and I don't even get into permissions. Let's just start with the basic setup of a lake house and then people accessing that and doing additional actions on them, right? So if I had obviously the lake house to semantic model, great. But probably people are going to want to be doing some data engineering things on it to enhance it. Maybe there's some data science things. And the best practice to unclutter where all of a sudden these notebooks are created. Now there's multiple, you have the semantic models. Maybe someone's doing an experiment. Maybe it's getting pushed to a SQL database because we're doing the applications, right? I think there has to be, I wish when you created an artifact that it would give it or you could set up like a template name, right? Instead of notebook one, right? I hate that so much. There has to be some naming convention right off the bat that you have to implement. And that's not something that's in a sense of global acceptance or a global process, kind of like how we have DAX format best practices. We don't have that with Fabric. The organization of it, not just if it's in a folder or not, but how many workspaces are we creating? The idea with the CI/CD and that workspace explosion is 100%. To be honest, Mike, I kind of stay away with some of my projects with dealing with the dev prod with workspaces because I hate seeing so many freaking workspaces in my environment. It's so frustrating because they're not organized. Because I may have a Git repo with branches, which makes sense, but in Power BI, you see, it just becomes a nightmare. So, yes, you can do that.
Yes and
but
no.
I don't think that's the best experience.
I think so. I'm going to lean back here. So the tooling has gotten a lot better, right? So let's talk specifically. So patterns. So there's two things I want to kind of touch on: patterns for your organization, and then CI/CD patterns. I think those are two main topics we're talking about in this question. The one pattern here is, what does this look like for your organization to have central BI and people consuming data, right? I think that sets up a lot of the pattern around how you identify what teams need to do what work, right? I'm a firm believer of use the UI that Power BI gives you, the data story around. So if you want to be an organization that kind of like is deeply integrated as you can without a lot of extra effort, like writing a lot of code, if your team is, let me say it this way, I'm going to step back here. If your team is very comfortable in VS Code and running Git, right? That's a traditional software development experience. Most business teams don't see it that way. Most business teams are not thinking in terms of GitHub check-ins. They're not thinking in branches. They're not thinking in these other patterns, right? That is a software development world, or even maybe a data engineering world that we're bringing more towards that business user. So one thing you have to do as an organization is educate your team. What is Git? How do we use it? What's the integration with it? If you're a bigger organization, we're at 10,000 people for this org. And again, I don't know what the ratio is of like how many developers versus how many consumers of information here, right? How much of this needs to be self-service? How much of it doesn't? Those are decisions you need to make at the organization level. But at 10,000 users potentially of Power BI, you are going to need a central BI team, period. I think that's a given.
Sure. Yeah.
In that team, you need to identify what does central BI and data engineering need to own? Is there a team of individuals that are coming from IT that is going to build data engineering products or data tables inside lakehouses? Or is that going to be owned by the central BI team? Then once you have this identified, then you can specify how do we distribute and deploy things. And this is where things get a little bit, again, it's getting better. It's not quite perfect yet, but it's definitely getting better. Inside the deployment pipelines, you can use variable libraries. That's just one of the technologies that Microsoft provided that I think is extremely useful here. Variable libraries allow you to relocate variables between servers and data flows and all these other things that you can't quite connect. So as you move items between different environments, you can use the variable library to switch out those variables as you go, which is really ideal.
Sure. Yeah. I don't have any qualms there, but I think you're giving a lot of credit. I think you're being very, very generous, Mike, on the workspace organization and that ability, because I don't you said like we're getting there. I don't think we're close yet. I think
do you use domains and tagging?
I do, but
that's my solution for this. Like the amount of workspaces I get anymore, not a problem to me. If you're not using domains to build out what you're doing for like dev things, or like domains and filtering is everywhere in the product. It's super useful. And I don't have any issue with using domains and tagging to help me align what work I'm supposed to be working on to patterns inside the development system. I'd also argue, Tommy, you're the one setting things up. So you are the one that can see the proliferation of all the workspaces. When you start talking central BI, I think there's a pattern here that developers don't need access to test and prod. They should not have access to test and prod. So if I'm a developer building products inside Fabric as a data developer, I should only have access to dev. That's the only thing I need to have access to. So when you see a proliferation of workspaces, you should never be deploying from desktop to test, from desktop to production. There should always be some sort of deployment pipeline or some kind of automation that's deploying out what you want directly into those environments outside of this. So going back to the CDI/CD patterns, once you identify proper structure in your company around central BI and OneLake catalogs and what you're going to build there, you need to be using domain tagging. You need to be figuring out who your developers are, and you need to be building a developer level workspace and thinking about when does the developer create their own effort and merge their changes back into the dev branch for integration testing? And then how do you get from dev to test to prod? I think it's with the deployment pipelines, and I think it actually works pretty well here. I don't have a lot of issues with it.
So you would say completely recommend then the deployment pipelines as where you would go with this?
This is a 10,000 user organization. I don't think there's enough people in this organization to actually hire a DevOps team to auto deploy everything that you're going to need everywhere. I think we're not big enough yet to do that. I think at this size company, you're going to have a smaller central BI team, maybe 3, 4, 5 people max, right? And at that scale, I think it makes a lot more sense to have the deployment pipelines just handle a lot of that work for you. And again, I'm thinking here in this pattern, lake houses for data, semantic models for modeling, and then reports on top of that. And then everything fits very nicely through this pipeline. And with you're using those objects, you can easily design around variable libraries and semantic models to get everything linking correctly together through the different environments.
And here's the thing, though. When you're also dealing, what would you say then just about from the name convention or that's one thing about the automation of pushing things. For me, when I'm thinking about this, we'll set aside, which is kind of impossible, the CI/CD features here. The organization, and I do love in the mailbag how he does outline the multiple kind of, I don't want to say scenarios, but a higher level than that. You have dev, test, prod, and self-service. You have bronze, silver, gold. You have the pipeline, lake house, and the models. And I don't think the business domains there, because here's the thing. To me, I honestly feel business domains still feel like, to me, that they are intended for, it's an organization or business thing, not a development thing. And this is what I'm trying to say. Consider when you look at GitHub branches. If you don't know what a GitHub branch is, it can look kind of intimidating, but branches make a lot of sense, especially the way you actually navigate it. Domains are just more or less a category. It's a glorified tag, and I hate saying that, but it's not really meant from a development point of view. You can say it is, but when you look at other patterns of organization and for different versioning, domains are not helping there. It can help in terms of your departments, but again, we were trying to already solve that before when we had like workspaces, and Microsoft's or best practices was build your workspaces around your departments. Okay, so domains could be a higher level than that. Do you see what I'm saying here? There's the business view of categorizing and organizing information, and then there's the development view.
Yes, but one is not required to have the other. What I would argue here. Business domains are, I'm the HR team, human resources stuff. I am the sales team. I'm the research team, right? Those teams may need similar data from the same tables, or they may need entirely different data. So your strategy around, and there's a lot of terms here that are being mixed up that I don't really like in the question here. They're talking about like, okay, how do we manage dev, test, prod? Okay, that is a procedure that you use in DevOps, development operations, to help you provide consistency with what you're deploying, right? You do dev, test, prod, and you need to have clear definitions of what those mean. That is not the same as bronze, silver, and gold. Those are not the same stuff. Inside dev, you may have bronze, silver, and gold enrichment of data, and that may be carried through all the different environments. So just word soliding all these things together doesn't really give you the answer. So dev, test, prod is designed for a central BI team to regularly deploy content at a good standard clip. Bronze, silver, and gold are ways to organize and collect data from any data domain that you're talking about, whatever the system comes from, right? It could be SAP, Oracle, right? You bring in the raw data, you transform it, and then you make it better. That pattern, bronze, silver, and gold, will exist in dev, test, and prod if you build the process correctly. So you're it's like a subset. It's another line of thinking. And then we talk about data domains or business domains, right? Business domains, I don't need the same data that you do, Tommy, all the time, or I don't look at the data the same way that you do. So to me, this is you have to look at your organization and have that central BI team decide on some patterns you're going to follow, and then you use what data does this business need. Do we do bronze, silver, gold, or other layers of enrichment of data? Again, bronze, silver, gold is just a concept. It's taking data in at a raw level and producing it to be consumed by somebody else. That's all that it's doing. It's the data warehouse. There is bronze, silver, gold is simple in my terms. I don't think people overcomplicate it. They try and make it more complicated. It doesn't mean that. It just means it's a data warehouse, and you're refining and creating efficient tables to be consumed. So when I look at this, I go, okay, you need to align your business on what pattern should you be following. The central BI team should define how many environments they have. Dev, test, prod, and then what does a self-service workspace look like? So to me, I think you need to understand what data is being currently developed, what are the needs of these different departments, and do they need the same data? Central BI should be organizing all that. All of that is being organized and managed independently of Fabric. You don't even need Fabric for this conversation. You don't. Tell me why you need Fabric to organize what data is used by department. Fabric is not required to do that. You should know that before you go to Fabric and then design Fabric around what your business needs.
If you're using Fabric, then Fabric's required. I see what you're saying to a degree, but
no. The design of your data should come from your business and your central BI team. You're just choosing Fabric and you're going to conform the pattern of how best to deliver that data into your Fabric environment. I could do dev prod. I could do not CI/CD deployment pipelines. I could use Azure DevOps deploy everything. I could build my own tool. Like there's a whole bunch of other tools and solutions you can put on top of this. You shouldn't look at Fabric and say, what does it do and have it conform to your business process? You should instead say, how do I maximize business value first and explain and describe my company and what data and how they need it? Let's start with that process. Because you may find you don't need a test environment. No one's going to test anything. Great. Then that doesn't become part of your process, and it just informs how you build the pipelines of deployment. You see what I'm trying to go after here?
I do, but I'm not sure if I completely agree with your sentiment there, or at all. But that's besides the point. Because I think I want to move on to something else here too, where we're talking about.
You can't disagree and just not give you a reason. I understand you're disagreeing.
A rabbit hole. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole because
that's all right. But don't disagree and not give me an answer. Like, go ahead.
Deal.
What am I missing, Tommy? Like, what has to happen here? Like,
once you put the technology,
what am I missing?
Is going to dictate so much of your organization and your process. I see what you're saying to a degree.
How?
But Mike, let's say. If you're using Git, you are utilizing the branch strategies. You're utilizing version control the way Git intended it to be.
Okay, pause. There are so many different patterns in how you do Git. There's GitHub, there's GitLabs, there's trunk-based development. All of these, just because you say the word Git doesn't mean you're developing in a single way. There's a whole bunch of different patterns and elevation. Like, just all Git is what Greg talked about in our recent podcast, which is Git is just storage of files. That's it.
No way. Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
And just use Dropbox then.
No, it's not. It's not. It's concurrent use. You can develop concurrent products at the same time. It's a storage system for files that tracks all your changes. Git is not just it's not a process. Git isn't a process. Git is a way of you using a technology to inform a process.
Git is a technology with a process around it because Mike, if Git was just storage for your files, if that's all it was, then just use Dropbox and make it easy to have something easily synced on your computer instead of having the headaches of committing and versioning. And
you're wrong. You can decouple the process away from Git. Git is you develop the process first. That's why there's different deployment patterns with like different processes. You can develop a different process and then use Git in different ways.
Okay, so let's go down that route. So let's say you want to use Git for totally different reasons. Are you going to be efficient? And is it going to be organized for you? You can do it, but here's the thing. Every technology, if I'm creating databases, or if I'm storing files, there is a best practice, a recommended approach to using that tool. I don't use GitHub and I don't use Git to store all of my, let's say all my old movies I torrented years ago kind of thing. I don't kind of thing. There's better ways and better products to do that. And in the same way with Fabric, we are dealing with not just a technology, but you're dealing with, what that content is. If I want to view my movies, am I going to use GitHub? No, I could. To your point, I absolutely could. But that's not going to be the most efficient way for both the user experience and then just trying to organize that too. But would you agree or disagree with that? Where, I could use Git for other purposes. But there's a recommended way of using that tool.
I don't like your analogy of movie. I don't like your analogy of movie files because I can't tell you the last time I needed to store a version of a movie file. I don't version them. So
but you just said Git was nothing but storage.
it is. It's storage with version control. Just like I said, you're not listening to what I'm saying. It's storage. It stores code that you would deploy with versioning. It allows me to have multiple files, all in different forms and versions of them. Again, we just talked about this with Greg recently, which was, I thought I really aligned with what his definition was. It's version control. It's, I'm building something different. I'm changing code. I need to park that change and go back and fix something from production. That's exactly what Git's for doing. It's storing the files and telling you which version every single file and change is being tracked. So that's what Git is doing. The process on how you get things out the door, that depends on what type of process you're doing. Trunk-based development, GitLabs, GitHub development. Like there's different patterns, processes that you have put in place for how your team works. Right. So those processes are what you can use to get things out the door. What we're going back here to this client question is talking about how do we unpack, the central CI/CD pattern. Again, I'll go back to, yes, this is technology that exists. You need to understand how it works, but you still have to go back up to how do you develop? Does your team like to develop trunk-based development? How many environments do you need? What is the mentality of getting things out the door? So again, I think the question here around, I don't like this idea. Microsoft Fabric can't get a straight story from Microsoft or their various consultants or what are the best practices for organizing workspaces and artifacts. That's wrong. That line of thinking is wrong. It's not, there is no best practice. It is start with your business needs. Align. This is what the adoption roadmap does. Read the adoption roadmap. It's clear. Define how you want to do work. Figure out what process works for your organization. Come back to the technology, look at the technology, and then from there, you're able to formulate your process. So are there best practices? Yes, there are some. There are trade-offs from going one way or the other. If you use DevOps versus GitHub, there are certain authentication trade-offs you have in each solution. I get it. That's a trade-off you have to operate as a business. Anytime you decide to make a trade-off, you either are deciding to take the easy route and use something that's automated from Microsoft, or you're taking a more ownership responsibility around having to build more things on your own. You don't need to use deployment pipelines. You can roll your own deployment strategy. You can track everything in Git if you want. But I would argue the skills of your team will not align to self-service using Git. I would argue your central BI team needs to be educated and trained on what this new process is. We're going to use PBIR formats. That's what we're going to do to build. That is for a central team. If you want to roll that out to business units and have them help them, you can provide support around that. But I do think you have to start with the business strategy of like what you need to do to ensure quality and value out of the information and keep it secure. So I think you start there. And from that, it forms a lot of your opinions around what is the best practice for your business.
Would you agree or disagree, regardless of the tool or, in a sense, your process, there are still at least some, we'll call them fundamental recommendations, right? Regardless of what you're doing. For example, naming conventions does not exist, like that exists outside of Fabric. And in terms of from the organizing your content, obviously, that's a little more dependent on the technology, but I think that there are some universal best practices here that are not necessarily for like artifact specific.
I like your thinking here, Tommy. So this is going to be something for the ones in this podcast for this episode we're agreeing on because we've been adamantly disagreeing the whole time, which is good. It's good for TV. But okay, so let me go on. Let's define. I think what you're hinting here is what is best practice, right? So best practice is aligning the trade-offs with your process of what you're going to build. I think is what best practice is, right? So when we say best practice, yes, Tommy, we don't need to use deployment pipelines. We can get rid of all that. But the trade-off to that is your team now needs to know how to use APIs or semantic link labs to deploy items or write PowerShell to deploy the things you need to deploy into Fabric, right? So the trade-off for that best practice is, does your team know PowerShell? Do you want to manage a lot of extra code? Do you have a team to support deployments when something goes wrong? If the answer is no in some of those areas, there's only two options you have: educate the team and figure it out, or don't use it. That's the trade-off. So when I look at best practices, I have to take a lot of input in and say, what is your skill? And this is why I keep going back to like the business. What does your business know? What are best practices? How much effort do you need to spend on these different activities? Do you need to have central reporting? Yes or no? Okay, if yes, here's some decision things I need to be considering around that central management. If I'm going to use GitHub versus Azure DevOps to do deployments, where's your team skill? Do you even have licensing to one or the other? How big is your team? Do you have GitHub already attached to your company as an enterprise license? Do you have policies on that are going to inhibit you from using Git to integrate your systems? Right, there's a whole bunch of things already there that are going to potentially prohibit you from going down that path. So to say there's a single best practice, I think is a bit naive, right? You have to define what your team knowledge is and what is the thirst of how much skills do we need in order to get all this to work. Does that make sense, Tommy? Because I think there's trade-offs to everything.
I completely agree. And I think we have to.
Good. Ship it. We're done with this episode.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good.
No, I think regardless, we're just going to deal with Fabric where there's not going to be a one, obviously without being redundant, one size fits all. But I think that with all the recommendations and all the approaches, I think you said it on the nail on the head. No matter which way you choose, there are trade-offs to it. There is not a it's not like, hey, we have managed self-service with lake houses and also data science. Okay, sure. Template here, that's how it's perfect. It's like, well, there are multiple ways to approach that. There are some better than others.
Correct. But and it also depends on your team skill. Like if your team comes from like super dev world and you're always in VS Code all the time, I have no problem with you taking more of these more ownership on deployment things. Totally fine.
Interesting point you go here where you're saying what the team's comfortable with. I struggle with this one because it's that chicken before the egg type of approach where if the team doesn't know something and like that's available in the product, do we cater the organization to that or do we upskill? So this is
this is also an interesting. So 2 points that I would consider in this area, right? The fact that we're bringing a Fabric environment to a team, regardless, is going to require people to learn things. So like at the end of the day, we're going to have to learn stuff, period. Right. I would argue here, the two areas I think is, do we already know how to do it? And then are we willing to support it moving forward? Right. So if I have a team that's using something inside Fabric, for example, let's talk about deployment pipelines, fairly easy to learn, has some tricks of the trade you need to use to get it to work correctly. But I would argue like the learning curve on the deployment pipelines, it does some things really well and it will help you move items between dev to into production, right? You have to understand what is the level of effort for you to train your team to use that tool, that part of the tool, versus we're just going to roll our own and we're going to deploy everything ourselves. If you have a dedicated deployment team and the funding is there for you to own that entire process or spend the additional time, the only difference between that and using deployment pipelines is a longer learning curve, more testing, a person to support it. What happens when Tommy goes on break? Is there a second person, a backup person to manage and own that? How much knowledge do I need to give them to train them on how to use the process, right? So there's an extra burden of education that goes along with owning more of the process. And so if your company decides that's an acceptable threshold for you to take on, yeah, fine, do it. Does that make sense, Tommy? So I agree with you. I think at the end of the day, I'm saying you're going to have to learn something regardless. It's going to have to be done. Yeah. But to your point, Tommy, I'm not sure it's really chicken and egg. I think it's more around what strategic investments are we willing to make? What's the commitment to make this happen? And do we have ample backups? And again, Tommy, for a long time, you and I both did this. We're the one-stop shop. We ran the whole show. It was a one-person show. Like whatever I learned and whatever I thought was best practice, and we did it in our organizations. We built it for them, right? That's the starting point. So I think the reason you bring in consultants is to help you weigh some of these decisions, right? A consulting firm should come in and say, here's 3 options for CI/CD. You can use the built-in one. You can use a hybrid approach, like a little bit built in, a little bit not built in, or you can use a roll your own. Here's the 3 options. We know how to set up all 3 of them. Here's the trade-offs in each one of these areas. And so if you're doing the deployment pipelines, here's best practices for using that process. Here's best practices for using a roll your own solution and CI/CD. You need consultants to show up and show you, here's the patterns that we're seeing. And then you as the organization can say, okay, we're going to choose the deployment pipeline. Let's provide an MVP and let's evaluate, does that really make sense for us in our organization? And if there are weaknesses there that you're like, this is not good, or the trade-offs are too great, then you can step back and say, okay, now let's go try this more elaborate version of like, let's roll all of our own stuff. Does that make sense? So, you need consulting firms to kind of show up and have this. This is why you call Tommy and I. This is why you talk to us, because we've been around long enough. We've been here since the beginning. We've seen the patterns start. We've seen the technology appear, and we have been able to identify trade-offs by choosing one direction or the other.
Dude, I love it. I feel a little better about this, but I still think that there needs to be more created around that. Like, we'll call it the fundamental guidelines.
Sure, the fundamentals. I'd like that. I wouldn't say guidelines, but like guardrails. What guardrails do we need to adhere to? Yeah. I like that. That's a good term. That's a term used in the Microsoft adoption roadmap a lot, saying you need to be able to give people a lane to drive in, but you put guardrails up to say, don't go out of these boundaries. That's not what we're going to do as an organization. So I think a lot of Central BI team should be thinking about how many lanes and what is the messaging on the highway. That's what we should be thinking about in Central BI, building process and educational patterns that we want to instill in our organization. And then from there, you get really big value on the funnel of learning, right, Tommy? I think that's something that's really important here, especially when you start talking self-service. If you're doing self-service anywhere in your organization, you need to figure out what's the funnel of learning to get people from little to no knowledge down to we're now inside the guardrails and we understand what to do and not to do in self-service.
Oh yeah, and I think the self-service is going to be interesting with Fabric too, because are we just talking reporting? Are we talking everything else in between? But I think that for someone in this situation, whether it's a large organization that they're dealing with here. Oh, actually, let me ask you one more question, and then we'll kind of do closing thoughts.
Sure.
With an organization this large, I want to hear and we'll see how much we align. What's your take on having a universal approach in terms of like, hey, if you're going to do Git and yada yada yada, here's the practice you need to follow. If you're doing, managed self-service over here, this is the practice you need to follow. Or is it much more organic? Like there's those fundamentals, like very bare fundamentals, but in terms of the process, one subset of the company is going to use compared to another, even if they're both doing it, how much should that be followed?
This is interesting, Tommy. I think there's I've been working on a lot of software development stuff recently, and I'll maybe pull an analogy here that makes sense. A lot of times when we start talking to customers or clients around software development projects, you first need to understand where their mind is. What is their organizational structure? What are they doing? What is the requirement? What are we trying to hit? What's the milestone? So to me, a lot of times I do a lot of work on the front end side of projects is, what are your expectations? What are we trying to solve for? I want a lot of those clearly stated objectives at the front of things. When we clearly identify those main objectives, what are we solving for? For example, our organization has a lot of Excel documents and we export a lot of our data out of business objects. We want to transition away from straight exports, and instead we want to start serving models through semantic models, pre-built reports, and allowing users to explore the data inside a Fabric platform. That's a statement that we can say, like, there's a place where we were and we're trying to shift to a new direction, right? clearly stating the objective of where we're trying to get to. And you can then tie that back to, again, going back to like OKRs. We talked a lot about this with Seth back in the day, which was what are the OKRs of the business, right? What is a measure of success of doing a data platform project or any of these things? Well, the success here is speed to delivery of insights, more reports being used by central teams, faster execution of changes to systems, right? Those could be your main objectives. And all those can tie back to the reason we're moving away from this old world is there's too much stuff locked away on people's computers, and we're trying to move to more of a centralized world and seeing what people actually interact with. So that shift is happening. Stating those facts up front helps, I think, inform a lot of the what do we do next? What's the next step here? So I don't know if I answered your question, Tommy, a little bit, but when I spend a lot more time on the definition of what we're trying to do, because that informs a lot of how we do it.
Yeah, I think this is where we're always going to slightly differ, where I'm always going to have a slight feeling towards not just what are we trying to do, but it's looking at the technology landscape and kind of identifying like the resources involved. It's identifying, do we actually have that skill? Because a lot of times when you adopt or a new technology, if they're all in a Fabric, I will make a good bet in saying that there's a good there's a good probability that some people don't have the necessary experience or skill for using Fabric, or they're not aware of what can be done, right? Just because it was like, hey, we want to do this. It's one of those, let's understand the ideal approach to using Fabric. What if you want to do SQL databases in Fabric? Okay, what's the ideal person look like? What's their skill set? What's their knowledge, etc. And then kind of identifying, okay, is that even available? It's like actually my best friend's dad, he was an engineer, but when I started getting a data analyst, he told me something that I kind of approached now to businesses as well. He's like, anytime you start on one of your projects, ask these 3 questions. And I'm going to analogy this to people. He's like, what data do I need? What data do I have? And what do I need to do to get what I need? And I've really actually used that approach every time. But I think for people saying they want to do notebooks, they want to do managed self-service, is like, okay, what do we need? What is the, skills, experience, permissions, etc. there? What does the organization or that team actually have right now? So if we want to get there, do we need to give them, I think to your point, do we need to give them knowledge that this is an approach, right? Because if no one knows about Git, that doesn't mean that we can't use Git. Or if no one knows about using the Fabric API, that doesn't mean we're not going to use it. It need to put on the table to say, this can really speed up X, Y, and Z, rather than we just want to do our old process. So that's the only place I would slightly differ.
It's interesting, Tommy. So what you described to me is kind of exactly how I've approached what my statement I think was earlier, which is, let's go back to the analogy of that we use a lot on the podcast. If this process doesn't make money or save money, why are we doing it? Right. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a reporting piece of this that is, if this process or thing that you're doing doesn't make you money or save you money, you should really evaluate seriously, are we really requiring to do it? So also I'll note here as well, and I'm using Comet, the browser, the new browser here, which is kind of cool. I've been Googling some things here on the side here, which has been super helpful. And it says, what my question that kind of came was, what Git branch strategies minimizes production risk? And I thought that question was really interesting, because whenever we're applying process or technology, Git, process, deployment pipelines, workspace development, all we're doing is we're trying to minimize risk to develop something, I think is what I'm seeing here. So the reason you put Git in place, the reason you do version tracking on individual files and roll things out, is because you're trying to minimize getting something from developers' hands into a production environment with the least amount of risk. And this is a technique, a proven solution that is being, from the software development world, that's being brought forward into the Power BI data world. And a lot of data developers have no concept of this. If you're just in powerbi.com, you're using SharePoint and versioning files by using final on the end of them, or you're using SharePoint to version files and deploy them strategically that way. Like there's very rudimentary functions that we're doing to make sure that we have data being developed and data being able to be produced with reliable outputs. So all this to say, Tommy, to go back to your question here, right? I think what you're describing to me is going back and reaffirming more of my point around we should not be scared about educating people. We also need to understand Fabric, or have people that understand Fabric fully to help us understand the art of the possible. This is where I think consultants go. This is where you get online education. Go to learn.microsoft.com, right? As central BI leaders or leaders of people developing in Fabric, you need to be educated or bring people around you who know what it does, how to make it work. What are the trade-offs? That's the reason if you're hiring consultants and they're not helping you avoid potholes in your process, why are you hiring them? You're just now hiring hired work, right? So in my opinion, when I look at a contractor, it's not someone there just to be there as a warm body to help you get stuff out the door. It's someone there to add guidance, what's been there before, and help you build things or skills in your team. You're bringing those people in to educate and develop talent on your team that you can reuse over and over again. That's the real value of consultants. So I'll go back to your point, Tommy, right? Why do this? What about the skills that don't match in the team? Yes, it's going to happen. You need a plan for it. But just be mindful that just because people don't understand or haven't learned these processes in Fabric doesn't mean you should just throw out Fabric and not go forward with it. You just need thinking about the training funnel on how to get people educated and up to speed. There's a ton of really interesting trainings, educational test exams you can go get from Microsoft. It will encourage you to go learn things on MicrosoftFabric.com. You can learn this stuff. And the neat part is, Tommy, we're in a world right now where almost anything you need to learn about Fabric, already online, already in the internet, and someone's probably made a video on it. Like it's all there. I'll even point to, Tommy, let's learn Fabric. You and I have done like 18 episodes, 12 episodes. I don't remember how many it is. We've done 18 episodes around just getting your feet wet and working inside Fabric. And Tommy, to be frankly honest, we should probably pull that up again and do some more Let's Learn Fabrics and building some more things, because there's a lot of new things in Fabric that have shown up recently. Let's do more of those things. So there's probably a lot more we could potentially add here as well. And I run an entire class, training.tips, that helps people in the community get together, connect, and learn about these different new features around Fabric as well. So that's another area to get involved with as well. All right, Tommy, we're definitely at time. We probably need to wrap here. Let's wrap this up. Any final thoughts as we go forward here?
No, I think our final 20 minutes or 15 minutes is exactly where you need to have an approach, where you need to understand and you need to probably outline and deliver the multiple or choices on how we're going to actually deploy this, and come up with those limitations and what those pros and cons are. But yeah, that's kind of the experience is going to be needed there, but there is not going to be a set standard way that's always going to work. You're always going to, regardless of what process you choose, how you do choose to organize or implement, it's always going to come with some hiccup. What you need to understand is, where do you want the organization to be? What is the standards that you want to implement? And then letting the technology be part of that. So that's all I got.
This stuff is very new. Microsoft is building this stuff as we speak. We're learning best practices as we go here. I think going back to the Microsoft adoption roadmap, or Fabric adoption roadmap, is the way to go. Figure out what your business needs. Align. There's different strategies you have. Evaluate whether or not you can learn that technology, and then are you willing to support it, right? If you pick a part of the technology that you're not willing to support, I probably would argue it's probably not the best solution for you. Once you have picked an alignment on which CI/CD pattern you're going to use, is it bronze, silver, gold? What's your lakehouse strategy? Document it out. We've done a number of projects with clients where we just sit down and talk about how we design your world so that it works for you. And once we do that, people get a much clearer picture around how to build their workspaces and their semantic models and orchestrate their environment so that it works for their business. Some businesses do a lot of dev prod. Some organizations do dev test prod. Others have dev test QA and prod. All those things come with trade-offs. Each one of those processes have best practices in them. That's where I would say you'd have to hire consultants. So this is an evolving space in the BI world. And I think it's going to be a lot of new, interesting technology that Microsoft has continued building that's going to make this interesting and fun. And we'll keep Tommy and I busy for the next, hopefully, 10 years working in the data space. It's been a very good career move for both of us. That being said, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. It's a little bit of a longer episode. Tommy and I got heated and a lot of concepts to unpack here. Great question. Thank you very much for submitting this question. Person who submitted the question, we appreciate you. And hopefully this gave you some food for thought. Reach out if you have more questions. With that being said, make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's where a lot of the content comes out. That's our main focus for how we distribute and put out content. That being said, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. If you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.